This is a Global Tel-Link prepaid call from
Adnan Sayed.
an inmate at a Maryland correctional facility. This call will be-
From This American Life and WBEZ Chicago, it's Serial, one story told week by week. I'm Sarah Koenig. For the last year, I've spent every working day trying to figure out where a high school kid was for an hour after school one day in 1999. Or if you want to get technical about it, and apparently I do, where a high school kid was for 21 minutes after school one day in 1999. This search sometimes feels undignified on my part. I've had to ask about teenagers' sex lives, where, how often, with whom, about notes they passed in class, about their drug habits, their relationships with their parents. And I am not a detective or a private investigator. I'm not even a crime reporter. But yes, every day this year, I've tried to figure out the alibi of a 17-year-old boy. Before I get into why I've been doing this, I just want to point out something I'd never really thought about before I started working on this story. And that is, it's really hard to account for your time, in a detailed way, I mean. How'd you get to work last Wednesday, for instance? Drive? Walk? Bike? Was it raining? Are you sure? Did you go to any stores that day? If so, what did you buy? Who did you talk to? The entire day, name every person you talked to. It's hard. Now imagine you have to account for a day that happened 6 weeks back, because that's a situation in the story I'm working on, in which a bunch of teenagers had to recall a day 6 weeks earlier. And it was 1999, so they had to do it without the benefit of texts or Facebook or Instagram. Just for a lark, I asked some teenagers to try it. Do you remember what you did on that Friday?
No. Not at all. I can't remember anything.
Wait, nothing?
No, I can't remember anything that far back. I'm pretty sure I was in school. I think. No?
That's Tyler. He's 18. I asked my nephew, Sam. He's 18 too.
Not a clue. In school, probably. I would be in school. Actually, I think I worked that day. No, yeah, I worked that day, and I went to school. That was about it.
Actually, on second thought,
I don't think I went to school that day.
you don't
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you went.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I definitely didn't.
Here's Sam's friend Elliot. He seemed to have better recall.
Actually, I may have gone to the movies that night later.
Do you remember what
Now
you
that
saw?
I'm thinking. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I saw 22 Jump Street.
Okay. And did you go with friends?
Yes. I went with Sam and kid Sean, Carter, a bunch of people.
Wait, Sam, my nephew Sam?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Sam says he was at work.
Oh, then it wasn't that night then.
One kid did actually remember pretty well because it was the last day of state testing at his school, and he'd saved up to go to a nightclub. That's the main thing I learned from this exercise, which is no big shocker, I guess, is that if some significant event happened that day, you remember that, plus you remember the entire day much better. If nothing significant happened, then the answers get very general. I most likely did this, or I most likely did that. These are words I've heard a lot lately. Here's the case I've been working on. Almost 15 years ago, on January 13th, 1999, a girl named Hae Min Lee disappeared. She was a senior at Woodlawn High School in Baltimore County in Maryland. She was Korean, she was smart and beautiful and cheerful and a great athlete. She played field hockey and lacrosse. And she was responsible. Right after school, she was supposed to pick up her little cousin from kindergarten and drop her home, but she didn't show. That's when Haley's family knew something was up, when the cousin's school called. About a month later, on February 9th, Hay's body was found in a big park in Baltimore, really a rambling forest. A maintenance guy who said he'd stopped to take a leak on his way to work discovered her there. He'd noticed a bit of her black hair poking out of a shallow grave. The cause of death was manual strangulation, meaning someone did it with their hands. A couple weeks after that, so 6 weeks after she first went missing, Hay's ex-boyfriend, a guy named Adnan Sayed, was arrested for her murder. He's been in prison ever since. I first heard about this story more than a year ago when I got an email from a woman named Rabia Chowdhury. Rabia knows Adnan pretty well. Her younger brother Saad is Adnan's best friend. And they believe he's innocent. Rabia was writing to me because way back when, I used to be a reporter for the Baltimore Sun, and she'd come across some stories I'd written about a well-known defense attorney in Baltimore who'd been disbarred for mishandling client money. That attorney was the same person who defended Adnan, her last major trial, in fact. Rabia told me she thought the attorney botched the case. Not just botched it, actually, but threw the case on purpose so she could get more money for the appeal. The lawyer had died a few years later. She'd been sick. Rabia asked if I would please just take a look at Adnan's case. I don't get emails like this every day, so I thought, sure, why not? I read a few newspaper clips about the case, looked up a few trial records, and on paper, the case was like a Shakespearean mashup. Young lovers from different worlds, thwarting their families, secret assignations, jealousy, suspicion, and honor besmirched. The villain, not a Moor exactly, but a Muslim all the same. And a final act of murderous revenge. And the main stage, a regular old high school, across the street from a 7-Eleven. Hi, are you Rabia? Hi. Am I saying your name correctly? Rabia, okay. I went to go see Rabia. She was surrounded by paper. Files, loose stacks, binders, some crappy-looking boxes. All court documents and attorney's files from Adnan's case. Some of the papers were warped and discolored.
Why do they look wet? They look like wet.
These have been damaged because these...
She explained that it was because the boxes had been in her car, on and off, for 15 years. Rabia is a lawyer herself. She mostly does immigration stuff. Her office takes up the corner of a much larger open space that I think is a Pakistani travel agency, though it's hard to tell. It's in this little strip mall. Across the parking lot, there's a new Pakistani restaurant, an African evangelical church, an Indian clothing shop, a convenience store. On the sidewalk outside, I found a teeny-weeny bag of marijuana. Baltimore County is like this, at least on the west side. It's where a lot of middle-class and working-class people go, many immigrants included, to get their kids out of the badass city, though the badass city is close by. Rabia's 40. She's short, and she's got a beautiful round face framed by hijab. She's adorable looking, but you definitely shouldn't mess with her. She's very smart and very tough, and she could crush you. Her brother Saad was at Rabia's office, too, the first time I went. He's 33, a mortgage broker, more laid back than Rabia. They told me about Adnan Syed, their friend. Not just a good kid, but an especially good kid. Smart, kind, goofy, handsome. So that when he's arrested for murder, so many people who knew him were stunned.
He was like the community's golden child.
Oh, really? Talk more about that.
He was an honor roll student, volunteer EMT. He was like on the football team. He was a star runner on the track team. He was the homecoming king. He led prayers at the mosque. So he was, everybody knew Adnan to be, somebody who's going to do something really big.
I later fact-checked all these accolades, of course, and learned that Rabia was mostly right, though she sometimes gets a little loosey-goosey with the details. Adnan was an EMT, but he didn't volunteer. He was paid for it. He was on the track team, but he wasn't a star. He did play football, and he did lead prayers on occasion. He wasn't homecoming king, but he was prince of his junior prom, and this at a high school that was majority black. They picked a Pakistani Muslim kid. So you get the picture. He was an incredibly likable and well-liked kid. This conversation with Rabia and Saad, this is what launched me on this year-long, obsession is maybe too strong a word, let's say fascination with this case. By the end of this hour, you're going to hear different people tell different versions of what happened the day Haley was killed. But let's start with the most important version of the story, the one Rabia told me first, and that's the one that was presented at trial. The state's case against Adnan went like this. He and Hay had been going out since junior prom. But Adnan wasn't supposed to be dating at all. Adnan was born in the U.S., but his parents are from Pakistan, and they're conservative Muslims. No drinking, no smoking, no girls, all that. Saad and Rabia's parents are the same way. Their families are friends. But even though Adnan and Saad and their buddies were Muslims, they were also, shall we say, healthy American teenagers who were going to do what teenagers do, so long as they didn't get caught. So Adnan had to keep his relationship with Hay secret. The state used this against him in two ways. First, they argued he'd put everything on the line, his family, his relationships at the mosque, to run around with this girl, so that when she broke up with him 8 months later, he was left with nothing, and he was outraged. He couldn't take it, and he killed her. And the second way they used it is they said, look at what a liar he is, how duplicitous. He plays the good Muslim son at home and at the mosque, but look what he was up to. Saad remembers the prosecutor's closing argument at trial.
His family didn't know that he actually drank, he smoked, he was having sex.
This was proof of bad character, someone who could be a murderer. But Saad says if Adnan's guilty of anything, it's of being a normal kid with immigrant parents.
So the prosecution had painted Adnan as a totally like a bipolar or like a maniacal dual personality.
We all grew up with that dual personality.
No, it was forced. I mean, I'm the same way. I was like, they could paint the same thing because I was actually homecoming king, which I don't know if my sister even knows. She did not know. So, I mean, I was dating a girl that was...
Wait. And why is homecoming king bad? Is that such like a good thing?
We don't go to homecoming. We don't,
because it's a dance.
it's a dance. It's a mixed gender.
So I was in the same boat. My parents, my sister, they didn't know about this at all. I mean, right now, more than 10 years later, she's finding out. I know. I mean, I'll admit, on one side, like my family thinks I'm a virgin, but on the other hand, I play, But it's the truth.
TMI.
Exactly. See that? Like that right there. I mean, it's kind of making her feel uncomfortable. She's like, whoa.
So just on motive alone, Saad and Rabia found the whole thing ridiculous. As for physical evidence, there was none. Nothing. Apart from some fingerprints in Hayes' car, which Adnan had been in many times, there was nothing linking him to the crime. No DNA, no fibers, no hairs, no matching soil from the bottom of his boots. Instead, what they had on Adnan was one guy's story, a guy named Jay. He's the third person you need to remember in this crime story, besides Hay and Adnan. Jay was a friend of Adnan's. They'd been in school together since middle school. They weren't super close, but they had mutual friends. Jay sold weed, and he and Adnan smoked together. The story Jay told police had problems because it kept changing from telling to telling. But they were able to bolster the main plot points using cell records from Adnan's phone. By the time I left Rabia's office that first day, I understood only one thing clearly, though maybe not the thing Rabia and Saad wanted me to understand. But what I took away from the visit was, somebody is lying here. Maybe Adnan really is innocent. But what if he isn't? What if he did do it, and he's got all these good people thinking he didn't? So either it's Jay or it's Adnan, but someone is lying. And I really wanted to figure out who. In the early morning of February 28th, 1999, Adnan was arrested by Baltimore City detectives. He was asleep in his bed when they showed up at his house. They took him straight from his untidy bedroom to an interrogation room at Homicide downtown. What Adnan didn't know is that just hours before they picked him up, the cops had interviewed his friend Jay.
This is a taped interview of Jay, black male, 19 years of age. We're at the offices of Homicide, specifically the Colonel's conference room.
The police recorded 2 taped interviews with Jay, and I'm going to play you the second one from a couple weeks later, only because the sound quality is much better. Just a warning that the tape is a little upsetting to hear in parts.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us what you know about the death of Haley?
Okay. Had left out, went shopping with a friend of mine, an ex-friend of mine, Adnan. We had a conversation. During the conversation, he stated that he was going to kill that shit, referring to Haley. I took it with context. It didn't stand out my head any.
Jay says he didn't take it too seriously. The cops have him start again from the top. On the morning of the 13th, Jay says, Adnan had left school and driven to Jay's house. Jay had graduated from school the year before and was working, but not on that day. January 13th happens to be the birthday of Jay's girlfriend, Stephanie, and Jay, who didn't have his own car, needed to go buy something for her. So Adnan comes over. According to Jay, they go shopping at the mall.
What did you do then?
We left the mall. I took him to school. I dropped him off in the back of the school. He went up to class. He left his cell phone in the car with me. Told me he'd call me. I went back to my friend Jen's house and waited for him to call.
Okay, now at this point, you know why he's leaving the car with you.
Yes.
And why is that?
Because he said he was going to kill Hay.
And the reason you have the car and the cell phone was why?
To pick him up from wherever he was going to do this.
Okay. And you had talked about this while you were shopping that day?
The details of the car and all?
The events, how they were going to plan out.
That day he told me, yes, he told me, I'm going to leave you with my cell phone and my car. I need you to come get me. Yes.
After
he had killed Hay, yes.
Okay.
Later that afternoon, the call comes.
you received a phone call from Adnan.
Yes.
On his cell phone.
Yes.
Which is in your possession.
Yes.
And the conversation was what?
That if dead, come and get me. I'm at Best Buy.
Jay drives to Best Buy and sees Adnan in the parking lot.
I noticed that Hay wasn't with him. I parked next to him. He asked me to get out the car. I get out the car. He asked me, am I ready for this? And I say, ready for what? And he takes the keys, he opens the trunk, and all I can see is like Hay's lips are all blue, and she's like pretzeled up in the back of the trunk, and she's dead.
They leave the parking lot. Adnan's driving Hay's car with her body in the trunk. Jay is driving Adnan's car. They ditch Hay's car at the I-70 park and ride, and then, to hear Jay tell it, they just kind of tool around Baltimore County together for a while as if nothing had happened. Buy some weed, cruise around, make some calls. After a while, Jay drives Adnan back to Woodlawn High School.
Why did you take him back to school?
He told me that I had to take him back to school because he needed to be seen there.
So was he going to a certain event?
It's practice, track practice.
Track practice.
Yes.
So he wanted an alibi.
Yes.
He wanted to be seen by the people at track.
Yes.
And you guys had discussed that.
He just told me that he needed to be seen. Yes. He told me that he needed to be seen at track practice.
You took him back?
Yes.
Are you having any conversation with Adnan at the time?
To the effect, yes. Don't tell anyone. He said that he couldn't believe he killed somebody with his bare hands, that all the other I'm referring to like hoods and thugs and stuff, think they're hardcore, but he just killed a person with his bare hands.
So at this point, he's bragging about it.
Basically.
He was proud of it?
Yes.
After track practice, Jay picks Adnan up again. They drive around some more. By this time, Hay's family was worried, and they'd called the police, who in turn called a couple of Hay's friends, including Adnan. The call comes in on his cell. The cops ask if he's seen Hay or knows where she is. Jay says after the call, they drive to Jay's to get some shovels, go retrieve Hay's car from the park and ride. They drive around some more, and finally end up at Leakin Park, where Adnan proceeds to bury Hay. It's evening by now, maybe 7 or 8 p.m.
And he asked me if I was going to help. And I told him no, and he starts just shoveling dirt on top of her. We leave there.
Let me stop a minute.
Yes.
You helped him dig the hole.
Yes.
How long did it take you both to dig the hole?
20, 25 minutes.
How deep did you make the hole?
Oh, maybe 6 inches at the most. It wasn't very deep at all.
Who did most of the digging?
It was...
Both of you?
Yeah.
Equal work?
I wouldn't say that, but yeah.
Okay.
So those are the key points. Adnan told Jay in advance he was going to do it. He did it. They buried her. Jay's story wasn't just the foundation of the state's case against Adnan. It was the state's case against Adnan. And the picture Jay drew, it's cold. I mean, he's not describing a crime of passion here. This is something much darker. To methodically map out the death of your friend, to strangle her with your own hands, so close up like that. That would mean Adnan wasn't just a killer, but a master liar and manipulator. A psychopath, probably. Adnan's in a maximum security prison in Western Maryland. He calls me at my request about twice a week. He talks to me from a bank of 8 payphones in the rec hall, a pretty large room where other guys are sitting at tables with metal seats attached to them, playing chess or cards or using the microwave or watching TV. It can get a little loud sometimes. Once I asked if all 8 phones were always occupied, and he said usually not, because guys who've been in for a long time, often they have no one to call. When I first met Adnan in person, I was struck by 2 things. He was way bigger than I expected, barrel-chested and tall. In the photos I'd seen, he was still a lanky teenager with struggling facial hair and sagging jeans. By now he was 32. He'd spent nearly half his life in prison, becoming larger and properly bearded. And the second thing, which you can't miss about Adnan, is that he has giant brown eyes, like a dairy cow. That's what prompts my most idiotic lines of inquiry. Could someone who looks like that really strangle his girlfriend? Idiotic, I know. When he first heard Jay's story of the crime, Adnan didn't say, well, it didn't happen like that, or I didn't mean for it to happen like that. He said, it didn't happen. None of this is true at all. He says he had nothing to do with Hay's murder, and he doesn't know who did. Hay was Adnan's first serious relationship with a girl. He says he loved her in the way of high school love, but then also in the way of high school got over her. So that when they broke up for good, sometime before Christmas break of senior year, he says he was sad for sure, but not obsessed or anything.
I just sometimes wish they could look into my brain and see how I really felt about her. And no matter what else someone would say, they would see, man, this guy had no ill will towards it. Whatever the motivation is to kill someone, it didn't exist in me. You know what I mean? No one can ever say why. People can say why. Oh, man, he was mad, this, that, or the other, but no one can ever come with any type of proof or anecdote or anything to ever say that I was ever mad at her, that I was ever angry with her, that I ever threatened her. You know, that's the only thing I can really hold on to. That is my only firm handhold of this whole thing is that no one's ever been able to prove it. No one ever has been able to provide any shred of evidence that it had anything but friendship towards it, like love and respect for her. That's at the end of the day, man. The only thing I can ever say is, man, I had no reason to kill her.
He's adamant about this. You can hear it, right? He's staunch. The problem is, when you ask Adnan to go back and tell his version of what happened that day, to refute Jay's story, everything becomes a lot mushier. Yes, he hung out with Jay on the 13th, both during and after school, but he doesn't remember exactly where they went or what they did or what time it was. Here's what he's got. January 13th unfolded like any other day, a normal, mostly uneventful day. He says there are a couple of things that do stand out, though. That day was Stephanie's birthday. Stephanie was one of Adnan's best friends and also Jay's girlfriend. Adnan had gotten Stephanie a birthday present, a stuffed reindeer, which he'd given to her in second period, Miss Efron's English class.
And it occurred to me that day that I was going to ask her boyfriend, Jay, did he get her a gift? So sometime during the day, before noon.
Wait, Adnan, just hold up for a second. Why?
Sure.
Why did you care whether Jay got Stephanie a present? Like, what's it to you?
Well, Stephanie was a very close friend of mine, as I mentioned, and it was just, I just kind of wanted to make sure that she also got a gift from him. You know, she had mentioned to me that she was looking forward to getting a gift from him. She mentioned she was really happy to get the gift that I gave her. So it just, as I would with any friend, I just kind of, went to check on that. I kind of had a feeling that maybe he didn't get her a gift. And I had free periods during school, so it wasn't like, it was not abnormal for me to leave school to go do something and then come back. So I went to his house, and I asked him, did you happen to get a present for Stephanie? He said no. So I said, if you want to, you can drop me back off to school. You can borrow my car, and you can go to the mall, get her a gift or whatever, and just come pick me up after track practice that day.
So then what happened?
Well, then when school was over, I would have went to the library. I know that I usually check, well, I didn't usually check, but if I was going to check my email, it would be using the library computer. Sometimes I would go there because track practice didn't start until around maybe 3 o'clock or 3:30ish. So it didn't start right after school. So there was a period of time of almost like an hour and some change. That was kind of free time.
This hour and change after school, this is the crucial window. This is the time when the state says Hay was killed. School got out at 2:15. People remember seeing her after her last class heading to her car. According to Jay's story and the cell phone records, she was dead by 2:36 p.m. So sometime in those 21 minutes, between 2:15 and 2:36, she was strangled. So that's obviously the same window Adnan needed to account for. To quote Adnan, my case lived and died in those 21 minutes.